Okay, we're moving on to the next stage in the process of habit. Okay, if we again go off the major building blocks of when we talk about habit, we're talking about a cue or stimulus that which sets off the habit. We're talking about the response, which is usually the habit itself, and we're talking about the reward. Okay, and the pieces will slowly come together because even though linearly, time-wise, that's the order. Okay, we're going to see that conceptually, okay, that's not necessarily going to be the order, and we're going to see that specifically when we get to reward. But when we talk about the habit itself, we're really talking about the response, and that's what we want to move on to now. Okay, and let's define, because there are a bunch of questions which I promised people, which we'd get to when we got to this point, okay, which were unclear when we were defining the word habit and when we're using the word habit, okay, and I promised that I'd get to it when we get to this part of response. And here, let's try to define what we mean by response, okay, because response is the action of the habit itself, okay. When I say action, let's remember, we don't necessarily mean a physical action. We're always going to categorize a habit as either, okay, a behavior, an action, a thought, okay, or an emotion, okay. Now, when we say habit in the broadest sense, okay, and this is the way we use the word, is something which we're doing, okay, not because of a choice, okay, not because of, we'll use the word possibly intent, we're not choosing to do it. That doesn't necessarily mean there's a lack of awareness, but the process, okay, can be broken down, okay? If what we've been focusing on until now is certainly the fact that there's an immediate point after the cue which happens automatically, and we say automatically, we mean not even with necessarily an awareness that it's happening, and sometimes there's an awareness that it happened, okay? But whether a feeling or a reflex or a thought, which happens mamash automatically, okay? And that's something which we have zero control over in the moment, okay? It's something which mindfulness can't help. It's something which literally happens automatically. It is so tuned into the neurons that it happens as a direct reaction in our mind. Okay, when I say in our mind, I don't mean in our thought process. I'm saying that it automatically happens to our system. Okay, and this is the part which the Rambam says we have absolutely no bechira over. Okay, in some form, some of it, when it's physical, sometimes it can be something which is totally reflexive. Okay, now that's part of a response, that's our immediate response, but that's not the limit of habit. Okay, as we continue, okay, that immediate thought might also on its own create an action, behavior, another thought, okay, and we'll call that a habit as long as it is happening without our conscious decision. Okay, we'll take an example in a second. Okay, but that second stage is different, because that second stage is something which both neurologically, okay, not just theoretically, neurologically, okay, I am capable, if I was aware enough, okay, or if I had enough self-control, I could stop that second piece from happening. I might even have an awareness and a consciousness that it is happening, but it's not happening because of a choice I'm making. Okay, let's take an example of a habit. Okay, of a process of a habit. Let's say an eating habit. Okay, there might be a situation of where when I sit down at the table, okay, so the urge to eat or the urge to be hungry or that immediate, and I know I'm taking a classic conditioning example when I say eating, but hunger is usually a feeling which we can relate to and a draw which we can relate to. So it'll be a classic type of example, even though it is not an exception. Okay, so I sit down at the table. The fact that I have an urge, okay, is automatic. Okay, the fact that I'm hungry is automatic. The fact that I would like to, that might be automatic. Okay. When I then, while I'm talking with someone, start to nibble, okay, it might not be a choice I'm making. It's not necessarily a nekudas habachira, in the sense I'm not sitting there and saying, Should I eat? Should I not eat? Should I eat? Should I not eat? Should I eat? Should I not eat? I'm going to eat. Okay, even though we could tie that in also. There might be a situation of, as I talk to someone, I might be nibbling. Okay, I might be doing it out of habit because I'm not choosing to. So we're going to call that a habit because I'm not choosing. Okay, but it's the part of the habit which, if I was mindful enough, theoretically, if someone were either externally or internally, would have the opportunity to stop me and say, wait a second, are you sure you want to eat that? Okay, and therefore, here we have a situation where, on the one hand, it's not being done out of Bechira, okay? It's not something which I'm choosing to do, and therefore it's going to be a habit. Anything which is done, either which when I am not mindful, when I'm not thinking, will sort of flow on its own, is going to be included in the big umbrella called a habit, okay? And that's usually the way we use the word habit, okay? Usually the way we use the word habit, whether it's good or bad, is something which I do without having to choose to do because I've gotten used to doing it. I don't need to think, okay? All of that might be included in the general term habit, okay? But part of this habit, as we realize, part of this habit is something which I can't be more mindful about. I need to change in some way, okay? Having a craving for something, desiring something, suddenly, reacting, having a certain feeling of anger. As opposed to part of that habit, okay, even though it's happening without a decision, it's just sort of continuing in a flow, I can try to, there are kalim, there are tools, there are devices we can try to work on increasing to create an awareness there. Now, awareness itself does not necessarily help, as we'll get to when we get to the most important piece, the reward piece, okay? Because I still am going to need self-control, and there still is going to, so awareness alone is not enough, okay? But at least conceptually in the model here, there can be a role for that mindfulness, okay? Now, the relationship we have between those two pieces of the response, okay, the original piece and then the continual action piece, okay, is something which Chazal talk about all the time, or certainly Achronim talk about all the time, okay? And Rishonim, we know the Rambam, when he talks about the relationship between Koach HaMit Orer as opposed to the action. Koach HaMit Orer is that immediate feeling, which I don't have Bechira over. He does not consider Koach HaMit Orer in the area of Bechira, okay? Even though it leads to action, and it's already set off a certain action play, but that I do have Bechira and Schar Va'onesh over, okay? Or when we talk about in Rav Avram Ben Rambam, who brings up in his Perush on Shemona Prakim, he brings up Rav Chaim Vital, talks about the relationship of midos and action, in the fact that first I have a certain mido, a certain automatic feeling, a certain relationship, a certain sense, which that now sets off an action, okay? The action I have bechira over, okay? The midah I have responsibility over in the big picture, but I'm not necessarily going to get a punishment over in the small picture, okay? So here's where we separate between this big umbrella called habit, which is everything which can happen without me thinking, without me initiating, without me deciding. All that is under the umbrella of habit, but it's broken up into two pieces. Okay. Now, before I go, just gonna throw out an example which I'm gonna be bringing up on the side, which is a project which I'm working on. I took upon myself. I became a Pekach Ne'eman Nikayon here in Eretz Yisrael. It's essentially someone who takes upon themselves, I guess they get a little card, basically being very mindful, having a certain responsibility, which also gives certain role of responsibility of cleanliness in the community. Okay, technically gives you the right to give someone to give someone a fine, which I would never do. Okay, but and my kids asked, why would you want to be why would you be the bad person? I say, no, it's not the good person, it's the bad person. It's sort of like being a medic. When you're a medic, so you walk into a situation and you see it as your responsibility, right? So you might jump in and intervene in a situation where other people might just walk by because they don't see it as their responsibility. Now, I'm a person in the community who has a responsibility of making sure that the community is kept somewhat mechubad. Okay? Part of my thought process is, how do I change the habits of a community? How do I help the habits of a community change? Okay? That the habit, when you see something, when you see a piece of garbage on the floor, the habit automatically without thinking is to notice it and want to throw it out, or as we're going to talk, that it bothers you that it's there. Okay, not that it bothers you that you're upset at people, but it bothers you that you have a need to pick it up and an urge to pick it up and to clean up, and or Khalila, even the opposite. As you have it in your hand, it would be automatically, intuitively uncomfortable to throw something on the floor, okay, or to throw something behind the bush, and not just that you're able to not be lazy to throw it out. Okay, so I'm going to be using also as an example on the chinuch side, besides the models of how do we help formulate and change and influence our own habits, both pieces, the habit of feeling, reaction, caving, automatic habit, and the continual habit, the behavior which can happen afterwards if I'm not mindful, but also now, how am I mechanech? Not that my role is to be mechanech a community, but certainly if I start to have, how do I create projects which help create chinuch for a certain behavior? Okay, so this was really an introduction to the structure, because this was a question which was dealt with by a number of people, was when we talk about habit, are we talking about something which I always do, like my habit is to always exercise in the morning, or are we talking about my habit of just the automatic piece? They're both going to be under the umbrella of habit. They must be distinguished, okay, in the process of habit, because we interact with them. The devices we have to interact with them are not necessarily the same. They overlap, but they're not necessarily the same. And with this, we continue. Kol tov.